Have you ever noticed that the things you want the most are often the very things that hurt you the deepest? It's almost as if desire carries a hidden price tag, one we rarely see until it's too late. We pursue happiness, fulfillment, love, success. Yet somehow, the closer we get, the more fragile we become. And the strange part is, even knowing this, we cannot stop desiring. Søren Kierkegaard understood this contradiction better than almost anyone. Not as an abstract philosopher removed from real life, but as a man who lived every word of his own suffering. Born into a deeply religious and melancholy household, he grew up with a constant sense of dread, as if the world itself was watching him with suspicion. His father, a brilliant but tormented man, believed their family was cursed by God. Those shadows shaped Kierkegaard's childhood, filling it with solitude, silence, and endless questions about existence. But the deepest wound of his life came through love. He fell for Regina Olsen when she was still young, and years later he proposed to her. She accepted. It should have been the beginning of a beautiful story. Instead, it became the moment he would spend the rest of his life trying to understand. Because right when they were on the edge of happiness, he broke the engagement. He walked away abruptly without giving her or himself a chance to breathe. Why? Because he feared he wasn't enough. He feared his melancholy, his constant thinking, his inner storms would crush her spirit. He feared giving her a life filled with the same heaviness that had haunted him since childhood. So he chose suffering over possibility. He chose loneliness over love. He chose the pain he understood over the happiness he didn't trust. And that decision shattered him. For years afterward, he wrote about Regina indirectly in his work, trying to decipher why he chose heartbreak, why he desired her deeply, yet feared his own ability to love, why he believed he would disappoint her more by staying than by leaving. Kierkegaard's philosophy was born from that wound, from that impossible desire he didn't know how to carry. From that experience, he discovered a truth that still defines modern life. Desire doesn't just move us, it terrifies us. It forces us to choose. It confronts us with the infinite possibilities of who we could become, and the painful reality that choosing one path means closing all the others. And this is where the hidden psychological cost begins. Not in getting what we want or failing to get it, but in standing before desire and realizing the responsibility it demands. If desire pulls us forward, anxiety waits for us at the edge of every step. Kierkegaard believed that anxiety isn't a flaw in our nature. It is a signal, a kind of internal tremor that appears whenever life hands us freedom. And the strange part is this: the moment we are given the freedom to choose, we also inherit the fear of choosing wrong. That fear is the abyss, and every human being feels it. When you desire something deeply, love, success, purpose, a new life, your mind begins to expand. Suddenly, you see multiple paths, multiple outcomes, multiple futures. But with every new possibility comes an equally heavy burden, the responsibility to choose. And this responsibility is what creates the dizzying sensation Kierkegaard called the anxiety of freedom. Most people think anxiety comes from pressure. But Kierkegaard said anxiety comes from possibility, from realizing that nothing is fixed, from realizing that you could become something extraordinary, or you could ruin everything. It's like standing at the edge of a cliff. You look down and fear rises, not because you want to fall, but because a part of you knows you could. That terrifying awareness of freedom is what makes the ground beneath you feel unstable. Kierkegaard experienced this firsthand. After ending his engagement, he was free. Free to write, free to explore, free to define his own life. But that freedom didn't feel like liberation. It felt like vertigo, the kind of dizzying openness where every path seems both right and wrong at the same time. Most people today feel that same dizziness, though they don't always know where it comes from. You feel it when you're choosing a career. You feel it when you're deciding whether to stay or leave a relationship. You feel it when you're standing between the life you know and the life you want. You feel it when you're afraid to fail and equally afraid to succeed. Desire pushes you forward. Anxiety pulls you back. And in the tension between the two, your identity is forged. Kierkegaard argued that anxiety is not something to eliminate. It is something to understand. Because anxiety is the proof that you are standing before possibility, before real transformation. It is the tremor of becoming, the internal shaking that tells you, you are no longer who you were, and you are not yet who you could be. This is why desire hurts. Not because we want too much, but because wanting forces us to stand on the edge of ourselves. It forces us to choose the next version of who we will be. And standing on that threshold is terrifying. But it is also the beginning of freedom. If anxiety is the dizziness of possibility, then despair is what happens when possibility begins to collapse under its own weight. Kierkegaard believed that despair is not a rare illness that strikes a few unfortunate souls. It is a universal condition. Everyone experiences it. Everyone carries it. And it always emerges when the distance between who we are and who we want to be becomes impossible to ignore. Despair appears the moment we realize we cannot escape ourselves. It's the quiet ache of wanting more but feeling unworthy. The heaviness of knowing you're not living authentically. The sting of seeing a version of yourself you can't reach. The fear that the life you desire and the life you're living may never meet. Most people try to avoid this internal confrontation. They distract themselves with noise, entertainment, busyness, relationships, ambition, anything that keeps them from sitting alone with their true reflection. But avoidance only deepens the despair, because despair is not created by the world outside you. It grows from the gap within you. Kierkegaard experienced this in the years following his broken engagement. When he walked away from Regina, he didn't just lose love, he lost a version of himself he had imagined with her. Every day after, he felt the distance between the life he could have lived and the life he chose. He wasn't running from Regina. He was running from the self he feared he could never become. That is the essence of despair. The painful tension between your finite reality and your infinite potential. We feel despair when we try to become someone we are not. We feel despair when we refuse to become someone we are. And the darkest despair of all is when we forget we have a choice at all. Modern life hides despair behind polished surfaces. You see it in the person who achieves everything but still feels empty. You see it in the individual who keeps switching goals because none of them feel like theirs. You see it in the one who stays busy because silence exposes uncomfortable truths. You see it in the endless scrolling, the forced smiles, the quiet longing for a life that feels real. But Kierkegaard believed despair isn't a dead end. It's a doorway. Because despair reveals the exact place where you're living out of alignment. It exposes the inauthentic, the borrowed, the artificial layers smothering your true self. It forces you to confront the painful question: am I living the life that is truly mine, or the life I think I am supposed to live? Despair hurts because it is honest. It strips away illusions. It shows you the truth you've avoided. And in doing so, it opens the possibility, perhaps for the first time, of choosing a life that is authentic, grounded, and free. Most people believe their desires are their own. They think they want what they want because they chose it freely, consciously, independently. But Kierkegaard would argue that nothing is more deceptive than desire, because desire rarely begins inside us. It is shaped, molded, and implanted by the world long before we notice it. And the tragedy is this: most people spend their entire lives chasing goals that were never truly theirs. To understand this, we must look at one of the most overlooked truths in human psychology. We do not desire things, we desire what we see others wanting. This is mimetic desire, the quiet imitation that happens beneath awareness. We see someone admired, and suddenly we want what they have. We see someone praised, and we want to be like them. We see someone succeed, and we feel drawn toward their path. Not because it's ours, but because their desire infects us. Kierkegaard watched this happening constantly around him. People living lives that belong to society, not to themselves. People choosing careers because they were respected. People marrying because it was expected. People believing because others believed. People wanting the life that made them appear successful, rather than the life that made them feel alive. He called this the crowd, the collective force that steals individuality without anyone realizing it. And the danger of the crowd is simple. The moment the crowd defines your desires, you lose the ability to define yourself. Today, this is more intense than ever. Social media has turned desire into a marketplace. You don't just see what people have, you see their curated happiness, their exaggerated success, their edited confidence. And without noticing, you begin calibrating your desires based on their images, their achievements, their validation. You want their lifestyle, their body, their relationship, their confidence, their achievements, their freedom. But none of these desires come from your actual soul. They come from comparison. That is why so many people pursue careers they hate. Why so many seek relationships that look good but feel empty. Why so many chase money without knowing how they want to live. Why so many collect goals without ever experiencing fulfillment. They are chasing shadows, reflections of what the world admires, not reflections of who they are. Kierkegaard believed the most painful moment in life is when you finally realize this truth. You can spend years climbing a ladder, only to discover it was leaning against the wrong wall. And the saddest part, most people don't discover this until they reach the top. But recognizing this illusion is not a curse, it's a liberation. Because once you see that your desires may not be your own, you finally gain the power to reclaim them. To ask yourself with radical honesty, do I want this because it's mine? Or because I've been taught to want it? Once you realize most of your desires were shaped by the world, not by your inner truth, you stand at a painful but liberating crossroads. You can continue chasing what others admire, or you can begin the difficult work of discovering what you actually want. And this is where Kierkegaard becomes brutally honest. Most people never find their authentic desires because they are terrified of looking inward. It is far easier to borrow society's blueprint than to create your own. It is easier to want what others want than to risk wanting something different. It is easier to follow the crowd than to face the silence of your own inner world. But the price of this convenience is a life that never feels truly yours. Authentic desire requires something uncomfortable: self-confrontation. You must sit alone with your own thoughts without leaning on distractions, comparisons, or obligations. And in that silence, you will hear something unfamiliar: your own voice. Not the voice of your culture, your peers, your parents, or your environment, but the voice that existed before you learned how to please others. Kierkegaard believed that most people are terrified of this voice because it reveals truths we would rather avoid. It exposes the gap between the life we live and the life we secretly long for. It forces us to admit that much of what we chase is hollow, performative, or inherited. And it asks the question we most fear: what do you truly want when no one is watching, judging, or applauding? To begin answering this, you must learn to peel back layers, like a sculptor removing everything that doesn't belong to the final form. You peel away expectations. You peel away imitation. You peel away what you think you should want. You peel away the identity built on validation. What remains is raw, uncomfortable, sometimes frightening, but it is real. Kierkegaard believed that authenticity begins the moment you stop trying to become someone admirable and start trying to become someone honest. You stop asking, "What will make me appear successful?" and begin asking, "What will make my life feel meaningful?" Authentic desire is not loud. It doesn't scream for attention. It doesn't need applause or recognition. It whispers. It nudges. It pulls gently from within. You recognize it because it brings a quiet sense of rightness, even if it terrifies you. It might lead you away from what looks impressive. It might demand sacrifice. It might isolate you from the crowd. But it will also bring a feeling the crowd can never give you: inner alignment. Authenticity is expensive, but the cost of ignoring it is far greater. Because you can lie to the world, you can pretend, you can perform, but you cannot escape the truth of your own longing. Once you begin discovering what you truly want, you encounter the next and perhaps most overwhelming force in modern life: choice. Kierkegaard believed that human beings are not crushed by limitation, they are crushed by possibility. The more options we have, the heavier every decision becomes, because every path you choose means abandoning 1,000 other lives you could have lived. This is the hidden weight of freedom. Modern society celebrates freedom as the ultimate good. Have endless options. Keep every door open. Never limit yourself. But Kierkegaard saw the danger in this long before the modern world exploded with choices. He understood that when everything is possible, nothing feels meaningful. When every path is open, none of them feel like home. And when you can become anything, you suddenly fear becoming the wrong thing. This is the quiet psychological torment of modern life. You feel it when you scroll through endless careers, lifestyles, and goals, all promising a different kind of fulfillment. You feel it when you have too many interests to choose from, too many identities you could adopt, too many futures you could build. You feel it when you hesitate to commit, because committing to one thing feels like dying to everything else. This is choice paralysis, not laziness, not indecision, but existential overload. Kierkegaard described this as the dizziness of freedom. It's the same sensation you feel when you stand before 1,000 possible futures and cannot step into any of them. It's the uncertainty that whispers, "What if I choose wrong? What if I regret this? What if there's something better?" And because of that fear, people float. They drift. They stay in motion without direction. They sample everything and commit to nothing. They keep their options open out of fear, not wisdom. But here's the truth Kierkegaard insisted on. Freedom without commitment is not freedom, it is torment. Because meaning is created through choosing, not through avoiding choices. Kierkegaard believed that choosing one path is an act of courage. Not because the choice is perfect, but because you accept the responsibility of shaping your own life. You willingly become the author instead of the observer. You choose direction over possibility. You choose action over fantasy. And in doing so, you trade the anxiety of infinite futures for the meaning of one real future. Modern culture tells you to avoid limits. Kierkegaard tells you to embrace them. Because limits are what make life concrete. Limits are what give desire a shape. Limits are what turn possibility into purpose. And here lies the heart of the dilemma. Most people don't fear failure. They fear committing to a path that forces them to confront who they truly are. But if you never choose, you never become. If infinite choice is what overwhelms us, then responsibility is what grounds us. Kierkegaard believed that meaning begins the moment we stop drifting through possibilities and choose a path we are willing to stand behind, not because it is easy, not because it is guaranteed, but because we accept the inner responsibility that comes with it. This is where most people hesitate, not because they lack desire, not because they lack potential, but because responsibility forces them to confront the truth they've avoided. Their life is shaped not by circumstances, but by their choices. And taking ownership of your choices means you can no longer blame the world. You can no longer hide behind excuses. You can no longer pretend you are powerless. Responsibility is terrifying because it removes the comforting illusion that life is happening to you. Kierkegaard believed this is why so many people avoid true commitment, not because they fear responsibility itself, but because responsibility exposes who they really are. He saw this clearly in his own life. After breaking off his engagement, Kierkegaard didn't pretend fate had forced his hand. He accepted the burden of his decision. He understood that choosing solitude had a cost. He understood that he had to carry that cost without resentment. And through that acceptance, he transformed the weight of despair into the foundation of his philosophy. Responsibility does not create suffering. Avoiding responsibility does. Because when you refuse to choose, you surrender your identity to chance. When you refuse to commit, you become a prisoner of your own potential. When you refuse to take responsibility, you live in the echo of what could have been. Kierkegaard argued that the moment you take responsibility for your own life, fully, honestly, without shortcuts, you experience something rare. Authentic meaning. Meaning is not something you find. Meaning is something you create. And you create it by saying, "This path is mine. These consequences are mine. This life is mine." Responsibility transforms anxiety into direction. It transforms despair into purpose. It transforms possibility into identity. But here's the paradox. Most people believe responsibility limits their freedom. Kierkegaard believed the opposite, that responsibility is what creates freedom. Because once you commit, once you take ownership, once you say, "I choose this," you are no longer swimming in an ocean of infinite possibilities. You are walking a real path with real meaning, a path that shapes you, challenges you, and ultimately reveals you. And this is where your story begins to change. Not because the world becomes easier, not because desire becomes simple, but because you stop drifting and start living intentionally. Authenticity is not a feeling. It is not confidence. It is not self-expression. Authenticity in the Kierkegaardian sense is a decision, the decision to live a life that is truly yours, even if it costs you approval, comfort, or certainty. And this may be the hardest decision a human being can make, because the world does not want you to be authentic. The world wants you to fit in, to follow the script, to mirror the desires of the crowd, to choose the life that is easy to explain, easy to measure, easy to admire. But Kierkegaard believed that choosing authenticity means walking away from the crowd and accepting the loneliness that comes with being an individual. Not loneliness as isolation, but loneliness as inner independence. The moment you choose a life aligned with your truth, you step out of the safety of imitation and into the vulnerability of selfhood. Most people never do this, not because they lack dreams, but because they fear the consequences of being themselves. They fear disappointing others. They fear failing publicly. They fear being misunderstood. They fear standing alone. So they betray themselves quietly, gradually, subtly. They stay in relationships that numb them. They pursue careers that impress others but drain their spirit. They adopt beliefs they never question. They follow desires that were handed to them instead of discovered within them. And over time, something inside them begins to fade. Not suddenly, but slowly, like a light dimming. Because nothing is more exhausting than living a life that does not belong to you. Kierkegaard argued that the greatest spiritual task of a human being is not to achieve success, not to avoid suffering, not even to understand life, but to become oneself. Fully, honestly, without disguise. But becoming yourself demands courage. The courage to choose meaning over validation. The courage to lose the approval of the crowd. The courage to accept that authenticity has a cost, and inauthenticity has a far greater one. You will know you are beginning to live authentically when your choices start reflecting your inner clarity, not external pressure. When you stop explaining yourself to those who don't listen. When you stop apologizing for what feels true. When you stop negotiating your identity for acceptance. When you stop bending to fit inside places that were never meant for you. In the end, Kierkegaard believed that authenticity is the only path that leads to real meaning. Not because it guarantees happiness, but because it prevents the deepest despair, the despair of never having lived your own life. This is the final transformation. Not perfection, not enlightenment, but alignment, the quiet, powerful alignment of a life that reflects the truth of your own being. And that is the life most people will never have the courage to live.